I stand with Israel. Why is that the message from powerful governments and celebs and influencers whenever Palestine is attacked? And why does Western media report inaccurately, one-sidedly on this matter? Well, if you've noticed, these people are mostly white, Uncle Toms,
let's take a stand against Muslims,
and plain old coconuts. And that's because Israel is not a Jewish cause, it's a white supremacist cause. To understand this, we need to look at how Israel was created and why the West protects Israel even if it's in the wrong. See, in 1896, before Israel was created, journalist Theodor Herzl, a non-religious Austrian Jew, launched the idea to create a Jewish state outside of Europe. This is when modern Zionism began, or political Zionism, with Herzl as the founder. Political Zionism was seen as westernized by earlier Zionists because Herzl's version wasn't really religious. He wrote, in this Jewish homeland,
everyone should believe in, or not believe in, whatever he wants.
He also initially opposed the idea to adopt Hebrew as the state's official language, preferring European languages they already spoke. Orthodox Jews rejected his idea to settle in Palestine. They believe it's somewhat blasphemous to return to Jerusalem before the Messiah. Herzl died in 1904, but his political project did not. Here's when the nations of white supremacy really got involved, with the help of a Russian chemist, the Zionist Chaim Weizmann, who studied at the University of Manchester from 1904. It was in Manchester where Weizmann first met British Prime Minister Arthur Balfour to discuss a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Here, Weizmann also befriended the Manchester Guardian editor C.P. Scott, who was a Zionist sympathizer. He connected Weizmann to British policymakers to pursue the Zionist project. Weizmann helped the Brits big time during World War I because he processed key ingredients that the British military was in dire need of. This achievement was a big win for Zionism. When asked by Balfour, then head of the British Royal Navy, what payment he required, he reportedly replied,
"There is only one thing I want, a national home for my people."
Now this was Balfour's answer to Europe's Jewish problem. A serious problem, warned Weizmann, threatening European leaders with the fear that Jews would be numerous and wandering if they weren't given Palestine, which Britain captured from the Ottoman Empire in 1917. The Brits thought this is great. They could get the Jews out of Europe and expand the British Empire in the Middle East as an ally of this Zionist colony. But there was one problem. Britain had already promised its share of the region with its wartime allies. The Zionists, however, didn't know about this. The British took this as an opportunity to take control of the land for themselves. They told the Zionists that France was being difficult. She wanted all of Syria and a big chunk of Palestine, unless they could convince France to give up Palestine in support of a Jewish nation under British control. This heavy task was assigned to Weizmann's senior, Nahum Sokolov. Not only did anti-Jewish France agree, but Sokolov also managed to get France's sympathy and allegiance with Zionism in writing. If it wasn't for Sokolov and his team getting France, Russia, Italy, and even the US and the Pope on board, Israel's creation may have been delayed or even terminated. This cleared the way for Britain's stamp of approval, the Balfour Declaration. What is the Balfour Declaration and why was it corrupt? It was a promise to Zionists by the Brits in 1917 to establish a national home for Jewish people in Palestine. British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour addressed the letter to Lionel Rothschild from the powerful Rothschild banking family that had been financing the settlement of Jews in Palestine since 1882. But this declaration was corrupt and legally invalid. Britain offered up land it had no sovereign rights over, as Palestine was still formally part of the Ottoman Empire. Not to mention, to settle non-Palestinians in Palestine was a violation of native Palestinians' rights. Despite this, Britain officially colonized Palestine when the League of Nations, the United Nations of the time, granted it the Palestine Mandate in 1922. The Balfour Declaration was included in its terms. The native Palestinians weren't even consulted. The Brits and the Zionists began facilitating large-scale white Jewish migration to Palestine, and even more with an agreement between the Zionists and Hitler. Yep, Hitler signed the Haavurah Agreement with the Zionists in 1933. It was an agreement to transfer Jews and their capital from Germany to Palestine. So each Jew would deposit their money into a special account in Germany. That money was used to purchase German goods, which Jews were supposed to be boycotting at the time. Those German goods were then exported to Palestine and sold there by the Jewish company Haavurah. Profits from these sales were then given to the German Jewish settler on arrival in Palestine. This convenient trade helped Zionists transfer European Jews to Palestine, which helped Hitler oust Jews from Germany and weakened the boycott of German goods. Palestine's Jewish population rose from 9% in 1922 to nearly 30% in 1939. This colonization dispossessed native Palestinians of land and employment. The Zionists were also illegally arming themselves for their nation-building project. Fearing displacement in their own country, Palestinians resisted British rule and the Jewish terrorist groups Haganah and Irgun in the Arab Revolt from 1936. Britain deployed some 25,000 troops into Palestine. They destroyed 5,000 Palestinian homes and trained Haganah members in military tactics to violently stamp out Palestinians. In 1937, the British Peel Commission proposed a partition plan, whereby Palestine would be split into 3 parts: a Jewish state, an Arab state, and a neutral zone containing the holy places. All 3 parties rejected it, and the bloody revolt continued until 1939, when a more pressing World War II was looming. Anxious to appease the Arabs, including the oil-rich Saudis, Britain then issued the White Paper. This restricted the number of European Jews entering Palestine. But still, more than 118,000 illegal Jews entered Palestine by 1948. How? As the Brits trained the Haganah, they also developed its intelligence wing, which not only helped Britain against the Nazis, but simultaneously guided ships carrying illegal Jews to Palestine's coastline, violating the White Paper immigration restriction. With Palestine closing to Jewish immigration, Zionists felt the Brits were backtracking on their support for this Jewish homeland.
The Goldsmiths Club in King George V Avenue, Jerusalem, scene of one of the latest outrages by Jewish terrorists.
From 1944, the terrorist group Irgun carried out brutal attacks and assassinations on Arabs and British targets. Another more violent Jewish militia, Lehi, took it upon itself to finish off what it thought the Haganah and Irgun were too soft to do: kill the Brits to drive them out of Palestine. When World War II ended in 1945, Weizmann and US President Truman demanded the Brits reopen Palestine to settle Holocaust survivors. Britain only agreed to allow the 1,600 survivors who had been stranded in Mauritius. The angered Haganah, Irgun and Lehi joined forces against the British. Irgun bombed the British military headquarters at the King David Hotel in 1946, one of their many terrorist attacks.
The Jewish terrorist organization Irgun Zwei Leumi openly admitted responsibility for the bombing. Many arrests.
The terrorist groups Haganah, Irgun and Lehi were later disbanded and formed today's Israel Defense Forces. Britain's stronghold in Palestine was getting weaker, while the Jewish militias were getting stronger.
At last, Britain announced that she has had enough.
In 1947, Britain admitted it could no longer manage Palestine and announced it would pull out by 1948, leaving it to the United Nations, which voted to partition Palestine into one Jewish and one Arab state.
The Jewish state colored light, the Arab state dark, Jaffa to go to the Arabs, Jerusalem internationalized.
But on May 14, 1948, Zionist leaders declared Palestine as the Jewish state, with the new name Israel.
The United States recognizes the provisional government.
The US granted the newly formed Israel de facto recognition, followed by the Soviet Union, which was the first country to legally recognize Israel. A war broke out between Arab states and the Haganah, Irgun and Lehi.
Victorious Haganah troops have driven the Arabs out of the beleaguered city, taking many prisoners.
Although outnumbered, these Zionist militias already had special training from the British. That, plus the fact that some Arab leaders had secret relations with the Zionists, resulted in the Nakba, meaning the catastrophe. 78% of Palestine was grabbed by Zionists as they massacred 15,000 Palestinians and expelled 750,000 Palestinians who became refugees. 713,000 Jews, mostly European, now lived in the new borders of Israel, with the native Arabs squeezed to a minority of 69,000. Today, there are more than 7 million Palestinian refugees in the world, who Israel does not allow to return, while any Jew or descendant of a Jew from anywhere in the world can simply move to Israel and get Israeli citizenship. If it wasn't for the great big colonial powers of mainly Britain, America, and France, Palestine today may have looked very different. Indeed, it was Herzl, the founder of modern Zionism, who prophesied,
The anti-Semites will become our most dependable friends, the anti-Semitic countries our allies.
The Allies' loyalty to Israel didn't stop in 1948. It continues today in the most powerful ways. The most visible way the nations of white supremacy support Israel is through manipulation of the masses. That's you. The whole Israeli occupation of Palestine from inception to today is illegal and immoral. But they don't want you to remember that. Israel heavily relies on you seeing Israel as the victim. This way, you'll never question its wrongdoings of the past, and so it happily continues committing war crimes with impunity, with support of Western powers. So how do they get away with this? Simple. They control the narrative. And there are two major components to successfully do that: the media and politicians. And that, my friends, is propaganda. No one does propaganda better than Western-backed Israel. In fact, it invests millions in what it calls Hasbara, which is Israel's propaganda and public diplomacy efforts. It lobbies politicians and governments to portray positive images of Israel to the world and spin any information that exposes the reality.
They'd be very happy to see Jeremy Corbyn no longer leader of the Labour Party, for sure.
It's a covert action that penetrates the heart of Britain's democracy.
Can you give some evidence that you suggest you will take down?
It is outrageous interference in British politics. It shouldn't be permitted.
It targets numerous institutes, universities, agencies, and NGOs, and even offers Hasbara fellowships and scholarships. And yes, it's Hasbara, when influencers and celebrities are paid to promote Israel.
They don't want people to know that Zionists are paying influencers to support Israel. This was an email I received offering me $5,000 to go live and show my support for Israel.
News reports are carefully whitewashed, championing the side of Israel, because as early as the 1920s, the Zionist campaign has threatened media outlets. This Jewish American author and critic of Zionism wrote,
"If voluntary compliance was not understanding enough, there was always the matter of Jewish advertising in circulation. The threat of economic recriminations from Jewish advertisers, combined with the fact that the fatal label of anti-Semite would be pinned on any editor stepping out of line, assured fullest press cooperation."
Sound familiar? Zionists have a powerful ownership of the term anti-Semitic. Anyone who is critical of or even questions Zionism and Israel is slapped with being anti-Semitic and gets cancelled. These are fear-mongering tactics to keep a lid on those who even think about revealing the truth. Arabs are also Semites, as they speak a Semitic language. So you'd think anti-Semitic means to discriminate against Arabs too, which Zionists do a lot of. However, anti-Semitism is exclusive only to Jewish people. In attempts to conflate Zionism and Judaism, Zionists claimed the term to attack anyone speaking badly of them and Israel. Basically the same way they claimed hummus and falafel. Don't fall for their tricks. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Judaism, therefore it is not anti-Semitic. Another creepy way Israel forces its positive world image is through sponsored celebrity tourism in Israel. It backfired in 2019 after social media users held singer Demi Lovato accountable for her $150,000 all-expenses-paid trip. She admitted that she accepted a free trip to Israel in exchange for a few posts. Her apology was promptly deleted. Israel also funds free trips for any young adult of Jewish heritage living outside of Israel. This is called birthright. The propaganda trip ultimately entices Jews around the world to love Israel and the IDF and to be proud of their Jewish heritage. This extremely sheltered and nationalistic vacation brainwashes participants to believe Israel has always existed and that Palestinians are terrorists who hate Jews.
Every Arab that doing a terrorism attack, we have to kill him, and not because he's an Arab, because he's a terrorist.
Arabs make a פיגועים and we need to kill Arabs.
Guess what else is Hasbara? Shadow banning. Social posts exposing Israel's crimes against humanity are restricted by social media platforms, while pro-Israeli content isn't affected. A country that invests so much into how its world image is perceived must have something to hide. And I wonder, who helps fund Israel portray this positive image while murdering and expelling the native Palestinians? Well, if you're a US or European taxpayer, it's predominantly you. Israel is the largest recipient of US foreign assistance since World War II, having received over $158 billion so far, most of which funds Israel's military. And that excludes the amount America sends for general economic assistance. Of course, how can we forget about the Zionist first BFF, Great Britain? The UK spends millions of taxpayer pounds every year on battle-tested arms from Israeli companies. Battle-tested means the IDF has successfully tested these weapons on Palestinians. Between 2015 and 2020 alone, the UK exported $445 million worth of weapons to Israel. And it's not just arms trade. The UK also imports other Israeli goods, including medicines, fruit and veg grown on stolen Palestinian land, and technology. Israel ranks high up at number 6 as the most technologically advanced country in the world. There's strong cooperation between Britain and Israel in cybersecurity. After all, it was Britain's intelligence service, GCHQ, that helped develop the Zionist militia's intelligence arm during World War II. You can't overlook the Western nation's role in making Israel a tech powerhouse that literally gets away with murder. But one technological consequence Israel and the West didn't expect was wide-scale exposure of Israel's war crimes on social media. Thanks to you guys, the tide is turning more than ever. We've witnessed the biggest protests around the world in support of Palestine and against Zionist terror. You have been shouting and gathering and boycotting and distributing facts like crazy for the world to see the truth about Israel's genocide and its ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. Even celebrities are using their platforms to support a free Palestine and now refuse to be silenced by Israel and the West.
They told me to be quiet, to be silent in this moment. In the last 3 weeks, I've gone back and I've done some research, and I'm teachable. I don't know enough, but I know enough that this is a genocide. We have been taught to just be complicit, to protect our careers, to protect our interests, and I'm not gonna do it anymore. I'm not afraid to speak the truth.
People used to be afraid of speaking the truth and losing their jobs, but now groups are organizing support systems in workplaces to talk openly about Palestine. Labor unions are being pressured to protect employees. Bosses and HR are facing your tenacity and refusal to keep quiet about Palestine. Western-backed Israeli fear-mongering and bullying is losing its power, so don't stop now. Cut through the noise and look at the facts. History did not start on October 7th. As I speak, Israel's government and army have murdered almost 10,000 Palestinian civilians in just 1 month. Imagine how many Palestinians have been murdered by Israel and the West since the inception of modern Zionism. Keep going, keep shouting, don't let evil win, lest you be on the wrong side of history.